When I started first grade, I immediately hit it off with two other kids in my class. My desk was right between theirs, and the three of us clicked almost instantly, and so, of course, you know what we had to do. We formed a club. That's what you did when you had a group of kids who all liked each other, who liked hanging out together. You're like, ooh, I get to form a club. We called ourselves the Candyland Club because we all loved candy and because we liked the board game Candyland. And it was great. And for our club, we each imagined that we were candy-themed superheroes who each had different candy-related superpowers. And I don't remember what my friends' powers were, but I was Bubblegum Girl. And I would shoot bubblegum out of my hands, and it would go and it would stick a bad guy to a wall so that they couldn't get away. Whenever we were out at recess, the three of us would play out these elaborate, imaginative scenarios that required us to use those candy powers. No one else was allowed to play with us. They weren't a part of the club, and they didn't have powers, so. Eventually, other kids in our first grade class would see us having fun together, and they asked if they could join our club. The three of us discussed this very seriously as a group. And we decided that we would be open to new members, but they had to audition. We thought very highly of ourselves. I remember being on the playground at recess and mapping out an extensive obstacle course on the playground equipment that club candidates would need to complete before we would consider whether they were worthy of joining our club. I didn't know the word hazing yet. This was an obstacle course that I probably would not have been able to do myself. Thinking back, it's very clear that first grade me had a little too much fun writing the rules of this club. A little too much fun getting to be among the people who decided who was in and who was out, dangling this sense of belonging in the face of other kids who just wanted to join in on the fun. Little did I know about the other times in my life still to come where I would feel on the outside of something, just desperate for that feeling of belonging. I would imagine that each of us in this room perhaps have had times in our lives when we were on the inside, and times in our lives where we were on the outside. Perhaps for some of us, it skews more one way than the other, that feeling. Perhaps each of us has had times when we felt a sense of belonging from a group we were a part of, and times when we just felt desperate for that sense of belonging. It starts as early as childhood, right? We form groups. We seek out our people. We search for people with shared interests like candy. We search for people with shared values or beliefs or experiences. We search for acceptance of our own interests and values and beliefs and experiences. We hitch our wagons to religious communities, to fandoms, to sports teams, to social clubs, to political parties. And it often feels good to be in community this way, right? It feels good to bond with others over what we share. There's some magical moments when connections are made in some of these groups that can feel life-giving and even sometimes life-saving. And I think we're all also noticing a flip side these days. When we look around and the division in our country just seems unignorable. You can see this division all over our social media feeds. It's there at family gatherings. You can see it in neighbors' lawn signs. It's taken over the news. It's impossible not to notice. And it's most pointedly around political affiliations, one of those kinds of groups where people have historically felt that feeling of belonging to something. So at what point does our quest for this kind of belonging become divisive rather than unifying? At what point does the scale tip from being something life-giving to being something that can be harmful? How do we seek out the beauty that can be found in groups and the connections that we so desperately desire from these groups without redrawing those lines of division that we're seeing everywhere? There's a story in the book of Genesis, in the Hebrew Bible, about the Tower of Babel. In this story, early humankind all spoke one language, and they all lived in one place, and they decided that they were going to build this tall tower, tall right up to the heavens, as high as you could go. They wanted to do this in order to make a name for themselves, so the scriptures say. God finds out about their plans and says, oh no, if they do this as one people who speak one language, well then nothing is going to be impossible for these humans. So to keep them from building their tower, God decides to confuse the humans' language so that they can't communicate with each other. God then spreads them out all over the world with their different languages, and that tower is left behind in rubble. Jonathan Haidt, a writer for The Atlantic, points out that we in America today are finding ourselves in the rubble of our own Tower of Babel. It's not a story about tribalism, Haidt says. It's about the fragmentation of everything. In Haidt's words, we are disoriented, unable to speak the same language or recognize the same truth. We are cut off from one another and from the past. It's a metaphor for what is happening not only between red and blue, but within the left and within the right, as well as within universities, companies, professional associations, museums, and even families. The fragmentation of everything. The fragmentation of everything. I feel that. Do you? Do you feel that? There are people who I used to really look up to, who now I struggle to have a conversation with. Sometimes I'll stumble across a comment online and it'll have me reeling. How could somebody say that? How could somebody even think that? I've stopped watching the news because I find myself needing to turn it off because I get too worked up. It's not a story about tribalism, Haidt says. It's about the fragmentation of everything. Fragmentation. There's a grief that lives in that word, fragmentation, right? So how do we repair it? Or at the very least, how do we keep things from fracturing further for now? One thing I do know, dear ones, is that finding your people or finding groups that help you feel like you belong, that's not a bad thing. It's not. It's a beautiful thing. It's part of what I hope we all find here, right? That sense of belonging, that reminder that we belong. And that's what it is. It's just a reminder because you belong whether or not a group tells you so. But when a feeling of belonging is defined by who we are not, rather than who we are, then I do invite us to question what it is we're doing. When that feeling of belonging relies on having a common enemy, rather than what we stand for or what we are called to, then I invite us to question what it is we're doing. When that feeling of belonging is about separating ourselves from others or about gatekeeping rather than joining ourselves with others, then I invite us to question what it is we're doing. More separation makes more fragmentation, right? But how do we rejoin the pieces of fragmentation all around us? It would be so easy to say that we should all just learn to respect each other's views. It would be so easy to say that we should make space for all sides in any situation. It'd be so easy, right? But the truth is that some views are harmful. The truth is that some sides can be oppressive. And our Unitarian Universalist faith calls us to not be complicit in harm or in oppression. I have a hunch that we all know the right answer, right? What we're supposed to say. You know, love and compassion, that's the key. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm going to need some more specific instructions. This past summer, one of my minister colleagues back in Wisconsin preached a great sermon that she titled, "It is hard to offer you love and compassion when I want to punch you in the face." Isn't that just perfect? What does love and compassion look like when we don't know how to love someone? What does love and compassion look like when we can't seem to muster the compassion? Writer and filmmaker and Sikh activist Valerie Kaur has some really helpful things to say about this. She released a book a couple years ago that she began writing 21 years ago, right after 9/11. The book is called See No Stranger, a memoir and manifesto of revolutionary love. And the reason she says she began writing it 21 years ago, right after 9/11, is because that's when she encountered that out-of-control anti-Muslim violence that targeted Muslims and Sikhs and others with brown skin in our country. Kaur's family friend, Balbir Singh Sodhi, was the first of 19 Americans who were killed in hate crimes in the immediate aftermath of 9/11. And this all sent Kaur on a journey of documenting the violence and witnessing and wrestling with many spiritual questions, including how to love in a country that shows her and her family and her people so much violence and hate. It all led Kaur to the spiritual practice of wonder. Wonder is the act that returns us to love, Kaur says. Wonder. wondering about the lives of others, wondering about the lives of those who feel hard to love, wondering about the lives of those who seem to hold the antithesis of whatever it is you hold dear, wondering how they got where they are, wondering why they believe what they believe, just wondering. Curiosity. Not seeing their side of things or validating harmful points of view in any way, just simply wondering. Valerie Kaur says this, she says, I started a simple practice. As I move through my day and come across faces on the street or on the subway or on a screen, I say in my mind, sister, brother, sibling, aunt, uncle. I start to wonder about each of them as a person. When I do this, I'm retraining my mind to see more and more kinds of people as us rather than them. I practice this with animals and parts of the earth too. I say in my mind, you are a part of me I do not yet know. I practice orienting to the world with wonder, preparing myself for the possibility of connection. You are a part of me I do not yet know. You are a part of me I do not yet know. Friends, if we are going to attempt to stretch across the fragmentations all around us, what better first step could there be than the one that Kaur gives here? What better first step? To prepare ourselves for just the possibility of connection. To turn to someone, anyone, and think to ourselves, you are a part of me I do not yet know. To invite ourselves to just wonder about them. Perhaps, then, with time, we can find our way to each other. May that be so, and amen.